Hello, my lovelies. This is Paisley Wild, and we are off adventuring into the spaces between. Being broadcast live tonight, of course, on Truth Frequency Radio, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live, and on YouTube. Hi, YouTube. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button, like, subscribe. You know the drill. It's not your first rodeo, right? Hope you're just having a fantabulous day that ends in Y. Yes. And no matter how you are listening, make sure you stop in and say hello in one of the chat rooms or send me the email at wildepaisley@gmail.com. And that's WILDEPAISLEY @gmail.com. And if you want to learn more about me and what I'm doing and all the stuff, you can always go to the website. That's www.paisleywild.com. And as long as you're going to websites and doing research and checking stuff out, go to ialife.com. ialife is the official sponsor for Truth Frequency Radio. Yep, it sure is. ialife combines the unleaded or non-psychoactive properties of the ayahuasca plant with some high-quality CBD to help cure what ails you or support the stuff or, do what it needs you to do. That kind of thing. Or it does what you need it to do. Yeah, those are the words I want. It's going to be that kind of show where I just don't have words. Yay. And if you just want to support my radio habit, which is absolutely fine, you can always do the cash tag. And that is $TheSpacesBetween. Call line is open because I haven't broken it lately. Which is good, right? And that number is 213-233-3998. Or if you're across the pond in the UK, it is 44203-393-2871. So for those on YouTube, you can see that I am wearing a hat. A lovely hat. A little bonnet. Actually, I love this thing. And it's really comfortable, and it's wool, or it's felted wool. So it's... I don't know, just a lovely little bonnet. And I got to thinking, what should I talk about tonight? Been talking about some heavy stuff and some complicated stuff and some big deal stuff and et cetera, et cetera. So I figured, well, let's go into fashion. No, I'm kidding. Sort of. But we're going to talk about hats and the history of hats when it comes to witchcraft. Because, well, let's face it, in our society today, especially in regards to Hollywood, for years, the witch has been depicted with a hat. Not a lovely rounded top like this one, but one with a cone. Goes up, And, why? Why is that? There's a couple of different reasons, and we'll get into them, of course, tonight. And yeah, it is interesting when you start looking at the history of things or the why society does the things that society does, because sometimes it makes no bloody sense, and I get it, because it doesn't. It really truly doesn't. But when do people make sense, right? Minnie-Me, one of her favorite stories is Ruby the Rainbow Witch. And she has a picture-perfect rainbow hat. And so the whole story is talking about how she gives her friends picture-perfect rainbow hats as she goes on her whirly-twirly way. And it's a cute little story, right? Well, it's another one of those things. Witches have to wear hats, apparently, even in children's books. Not so much. I mean, they do keep the rain off the glasses, which I have to appreciate as someone who wears glasses. Without them, I just don't see much. That's just all there is to it. So, yeah, I have to wear the glasses. Oh, well. So, yeah, talking about hats. So, when you do research online, it's like, hey, what's the history between the witch's hat? There's so much information out there that is wrong. We'll just leave it at that. It's wrong. This is not a sorting hat. It doesn't tell you which house you belong in. It is not that magical that I can reach into my hat and pull out a cat. That might happen anyways, just, wandering by. But specifically, with the conical shaped hat that witches seem to wear in fiction and fantasy and such. Why? Why are witches depicted that way? Well, the witch's hat, is traditionally considered to be just a black hat, often rumpled, very pointed, wide brim. Well, the wide brim is there so when she's out weeding her herb garden, she's not getting sunburnt on the back of her neck. It's protecting her face, right? Cuts the glare just like any other good hat, right? Well, within the stereotype, though, it's not it's not necessarily functional. It's more, it's part of her wardrobe, part of her apparel. She has to have the hat. Well, in, depictions of witches throughout time, originally, they were painted or drawn, often naked, with, oh my, Wanda. Wanda said that her hat covers things and protects her, and it's hit a smashed face by a puck. I'm assuming a hockey puck, several years ago. Oh my. Yes, hockey pucks are bad. They fly at high velocities, and they hit you with a zing, that's for darn sure. So yeah, be careful. Watch out for the hockey pucks. They'll poke out your eye. So, anyways, originally witches were depicted without a hat. The hair was down, and often they were nude, and the hair often merged in with flames or mists or fog or clouds, smoke, just different things to portray magic or a type of ethereal type appearance. And in a way, it was a sign of the times when those portraits or portraiture was done originally, because at that time, if you were a witch, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It wasn't necessarily a good thing. It was still on that cusp. But, to run around naked was kind of a, oh no. It was getting to that point where people were becoming more aware of, the need to cover up and hide everything because, yeah. And in the classical period when a lot of those paintings were done, they didn't have in a way, they didn't have that same problem with nudity that we seem to have today. They didn't have to go through the Victorian era yet, where nudity was bad. It's not. I mean, it's just skin, folks, but that's a different show. So, with, in the woodcuts and the stamps and the drawings and such, as time went on, witches were generally depicted wearing whatever period clothing was appropriate. Maybe it was a bonnet, maybe it was a headscarf of some sort. There was a variety of hats of fashion throughout time, and often witches would wear whatever was popular at the time, because you know what? Most of us aren't trying to buck society that much. We just wear what everybody else wears. We look normal, right? We don't have the hook nose, the big warts all over. My skin's not very green. Normally. Goodness. I gotta fix that. Can I snooze these? Yeah. That'll work. We'll make them quiet because they scare me every time. Notification alerts. Yep. And Wanda goes, yeah, when you're in the country, you wear a hat for protection and hiking, flyaways, yeah. If I'm, in the winter, I wear a hat to keep my head warm, my ears warm. If I'm out in the fall, often I'm wearing a hat to keep twigs and branches and stuff out of my hair just because it's highly annoying and I have a lot of it. Wear a hat for shade. I wear a hat to keep the sun off my face because I'm not as young as I used to be, so I am a little worried about too many burns, that kind of thing. Keep the rain off my face, off my glasses especially. Some people wear hats because they ride a motorcycle and they kind of have to by law. So yeah, there's all sorts of different reasons for wearing a hat. And even back in the day, folks would wear a hat because it was important. You shaded. Honestly, if you have a big floppy hat and you're out in the hot weather, the big floppy hat really does cool you down. It does. That's just all there is to it. It helps protect you from the sunlight. So through time, of course, the conical hat became very, very popular and associated with wizards and witches. And originally, they were brimless. It was just a cone, kind of like a dunce cap. And after a while, it became, brimmed slightly and then a little bit more. And by the Victorian age, the big wide-brimmed hats were very much a staple of the witches' attire, according to, the way they were being illustrated. Now, where's the origin? Well, technically, there are some Etruscan coins that have been found, ancient Etruscan coins, where they originated from the city of Luna, and on one side there's the goddess Diana, that's assumed who she is, and she's wearing a conical hat. So, that may be the ritual wear, or it may have just been the way she was depicted at the time. That being said, today, the hat isn't quite the marker that it used to be. But even the conical hat was often associated during the medieval times with the alewives or alewife. Basically, these were the women who were brewing the beer. And for a society at that time, water really wasn't as clean as it is today. People would get sick from drinking the water because somebody was probably peeing in it upstream because people are gross. And so ale or beer was often the drink of choice because it had just enough alcohol in it to keep it from being toxic when one drank it. Plus, there's a lot of carbohydrates within beer, and there's actually quite a bit of nutrient to beer, or ale, I should say. Not the commercialized beer that we see here in the U.S. all the time. That's also known as piss beer. It's a bitter beer. I don't like it. I don't like a lot of the big name brand beers. They're gross. Some of the microbreweries have fantastic pints, but a lot of them just... you shouldn't be able to see through a good pint of beer. It should be almost chewy, right? Not too bitter, in my opinion. Just saying. So, those making the ale, they made money, right? And there was a necessary commodity within their society. People would often go to the ale house to eat. Pubs back in medieval times often had hotels above the bar, the lounge area. It's depicted in a lot of fiction, and partly because it's true. The ale house often doubled as the hotel. It was a meeting place, a place of congregation. And because the alewives, were the brewers, they had a lot of power and authority within a community. And during the medieval times, there was a really big transition where the menfolk started taking more power and authority from the womenfolk and started to minimize and marginalize womenfolk. Now, there's many different reasons for that. A lot of it I think, and history really points at, came from the church doctrine, that women were lesser. And it was a way to control the population, to make women lesser, take away their authority, take away their power. Men are running everything, and the woman's place is in the kitchen, kind of a thing. And we're still trying to recover from that today, many centuries later. Anyways, so the alewife hat, really truly, was a conical hat. The rim, or brim, I should say, was a little bit bigger than the one I have now. So it was about 2 inches. And the hat itself really wasn't that much taller than your typical 10-gallon cowboy hat today. Just conical in shape. And it was just a depiction of the time. Think Robin Hood, if that helps. Robin Hood with the fox, the Disney version. He's got the little hat and the feather and all that. Well, that was an alewife hat. And because, yes, the women wore the hats, and the Catholic Church started saying that the women were evil, they were witches because they knew all these things, and they were trying to, pull that industry and that way of, or that form of control from the women. They started demonizing even what the women were wearing, to marginalize them and make them, insignificant. It's amazing how that theme keeps coming up throughout society, isn't it? People picking on women for what they're wearing. Again, different topic. I'm going to have to keep coming back to that one for crying out loud, though. Oh, well. So, now, I'm not saying that the alewife hat is the archetypical witch's hat. It's just one that was very, very commonly associated. But it was also, just a common hat at the time. Even the brewers, not just the alewifes, but the alemen would wear the same hat. It was just when a woman was wearing it, it was bad. But then, the hatters were very popular and rich too. So, even, Mark Twain has even said that the hat makes the witch. So, paraphrasing slightly, but the hats have always been, in a way, associated with modern viewpoints on witchcraft or what they look like. So I'm looking at an article here from, I don't remember where, but I'll put it in the show link. So there was the Phrygian caps that looked like the Smurf hats. Those are your French revolutionaries wore them in addition to the womenfolk. And the French revolutionaries were demonized as well. Very, very often the pointy hats made you stand out. And then the earliest, though, notation outside of the coins, the Etruscan coins, were 3 female mummies that were uncovered in the Chinese region of Subeshi. So they're also called the witches of Subeshi. And they had large conical shaped hats made out of black felt. So if you saw Sabrina the Teenage Witch back when Sabrina was younger and still in junior high, then one of her aunts, that's about what it looked like. So from there, though, a lot of through the medieval periods, especially in the 1700s roughly, books for children specifically started showing witches with the conical hat. And the tips became blunted. Sometimes they looked like devil's spikes, if you will, just to make them look more evil. And the pointed cap became very symbolic and easy to point out that someone was practicing dark magic, because obviously it's a witch's hat, right? Wanda says they used to have a place for hats and entrances. Yes, they did. Haltries is with haltry, cloaks, caps, hats, canes, walking staffs, umbrellas, all that stuff at your entrances of your homes. And then as, the time aged on, postcards from the American colonies back to Britain started having the cone-shaped hat, right? And then Mother Goose, for instance, and La Befana, she was an Italian mother, deranged by the death of her infant, flew through the night delivering gifts to the children. She's very Italian that way. She had a black hat, a pointy hat. And then during the witch trials, witnesses often reported seeing the devil and a conical-shaped black hat, because that was the standout, that was the hallmark. Even before the witch, the marks, the beauty marks or scars, or, the witch's nipple or witch's teat or whatever they called it, there's all these different illustrations to show that the witch's hat was a very bad thing. There are thoughts that a Y might be a way to punish the perceived witch by wearing a hat shaped like, like the bell tower, what is they used here? They used a different hat. Church steeples. Man, it's been a long time since I went to a church, but a church steeple, they've got the big point up there. Often there's a cross on top, or an angel, or whatever. There's all sorts of different things on top of the steeple. And then there was, at one point, a Judean hat, or a Judean hat, or Jewish hat. It was a horned skull cap, so that was a way to differentiate the Jews from the non-Jewish people. Again, that was anti-Semitism, and that was brought out, I think, in the 1200s. There's all sorts of different medieval representations for Satan's hat, or the mark of Satan to be a conical-shaped hat. Even the, yes, horned hats. So often medieval representations tied the Jews to Satan, because they've always been kind of poked at. I know, exactly. Like he says, poor Jews get picked on all the time. They do. But let's see, Jewish attributes had soaked up, I'm quoting here, medieval representations tying Jews to Satan were nothing new, and by the late 13th century, Jewish attributes had soaked up enough ugly significance to tar all unbelievers, hypocrites, heretics, pagans, and demons to wear the peaked Jew's cap. And that started in Hungary. So when Hollywood picked up, the Wizard of Oz and started depicting, the Wicked Witch of the West, guess what? She wore a hat. And from there, Hollywood ran with it. Witches have to wear a black hat. And I have another story here. I'm going to leave that one for after the break, because we're almost to the first break. Yeah, it's interesting because there's all this stuff about the witch's hat and the broom and everything else, and and honestly, if you're a witch, your very first outfit that you might wear for any ritual is nothing at all. So, in a way, trying to put a hat on somebody is just a way of marginalizing the witch and trying to control the witch, because obviously we can't just run amok in our skivvies, right? Yeah, no, we probably shouldn't, actually. There's laws against that. But, yeah, skyclad. Absolutely. So, first break is here already. Can you believe that? The night's just screaming by. So we'll keep talking about the witch's hat, and I'll translate that into the cone of power in a bit. And then in the second hour, I got to thinking maybe we should talk about some herbology just a bit. Because, yeah, why not? It's rapidly approaching that time of the year here in the northern hemisphere where we start putting stuff away. And in the southern hemisphere, you're getting ready to plant. So, hey, Leo. So, yes, first break. And when we come back, we're going to continue talking about La Chapelle, the hat. Hello, my lovelies. This is Paisley Wild, and we are off adventuring into the spaces between. I had a scarf on because I wanted to. I love my scarves. I have lots of scarves. Scarves are my friend. But you know what? It's not quite warm enough for a scarf, even though I like wearing them. That'll be Monday. So, what is it? We start Monday out. The high is 80, almost 90. And by Tuesday night, the low is in the 40s. So, we'll have a 50-degree temperature change between Monday and Tuesday, and I'm fully expecting the thunderstorms to happen. And I am just hoping that with the thunderstorms, there happens to be a bit of rain and not just the sky falling, because that'd be bad to have that much thunder and lightning and not have anything else to go with it, right? Because craziness, crazy weather that we're having. Crazy times that we're living in. Better wear your hat. Was it Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Everybody has to have a towel. Don't forget your towel. Doesn't matter what else you have, make sure you have your towel. Well, maybe you better make sure you have your hat, right? So, cone-shaped hat. So that's what we're talking about tonight. What's in a hat. To start off with, and the first theory, it had to do with the Jews who were being marginalized and demonized. Yes, Leo. Leo says, "Is it me or does it feel like fall already? Heck, it's August. It's still August, yet it feels like fall. What a crazy time." Yeah. I have a feeling that fall will either be quite long and fantabulous, or winter will be here a wee bit early, because it's already feeling like fall, and our long-term forecast is definitely showing a wee bit of coolness rolling in. A rabbit? Oh, what's in a hat? You're funny. So the second theory for the association of the conical hat to the witches has to do with the Quakers. Side note, Sandpoint, the little community where I live, has a church for everybody just about, right? We don't have one for witches or pagans, but then we have this huge lake and some awesome rivers and these mountains, so we have one built into the region. But even the Quakers have a church in Sandpoint. Technically, it's just off Main Street, so it's not even in an out-of-the-way place. It's well known. It's across from the senior center. Anyways, so the Quakers were happy to come to the American colonies because they dealt with a fair bit of prejudice as well. A lot of not necessarily racist prejudice there, but more a religion, right? Because they weren't Catholics, they were Quakers. And in colonial American, Justin, 90s and 100s there, you can keep that crap. So in colonial America, the Quakers were thought to consort with the devil and to dabble in witchcraft, which is kind of interesting to me because the Puritans and the Quakers were very closely related. But, that Puritan backlash against the Quaker community in the mid-1800s is when, that's when the Salem trials and everything were happening. It was about the mid-18th century, and that's when the cone-headed spell weaver began to really become popular within American folklore. And now, even though that's a theory, there's a tiny, tiny problem with that, is that, Quakers didn't wear pointy hats. They did have, some odd hats, and they often refused to take their hats off and for those that they did not respect. So if a church leader from, say, the Catholic Church approached them They would not take their hat off out of respect. They would just leave it on. And it was just one of the things that they did. They just didn't take their hat off if they didn't honor someone. And so the Quaker cap became a symbol of doctrinal insubordination to the witch's hat as a emblem of infernal craft. So, and yeah, I gotta tell you that often today's witches just don't wear hats. And we often don't wear flowing garments. Now, some traditions do wear robes with certain colors, or or robes with certain ties or colored ties, because that marks a rank or a level, if you will, within a coven. But that's something else entirely. So, in today's world, the witch's hat is more, I think, representative, excuse me, of the cone of power. And so what is the cone of power? Well, the cone of power is a method of raising and directing energy within a group of individuals. So basically, those that are going to perform or partake within the ritual form a circle. And sometimes they hold hands, sometimes they hands together, flat to flat, sometimes they link arms, whatever it is. Sometimes they may just visualize that energy, going from one to the next. And then they start to raise that energy. Thank you, Leo. Sometimes that's by chanting. It could be by singing. It could be drumming, or some other type of rhythmic, maybe the singing bowls. Oops, here, let's take the hat out so you can hear. There we go. Put the hat in the singing bowl, right? Just some way to start raising that energy, and that it creates a type of vortex, because you're pushing that energy in a circular form from one person to the next. And as it goes, it starts to spiral a little bit, and then it goes up. And so it forms a cone above the group. And then eventually that power reaches the apex above. Now, there are some that feel that the energy that is raised then continues beyond the apex, so in other words, past the point of the cone and travels out into the universe. And then, regardless, once that energy is raised and is completely formed, that energy is sent out in mass or as a group towards whichever magical purpose is being worked upon. So it could be a healing type of ritual, protection, it could be a weatherworking, it could be just some sort of earth magic, or man, there's so many different types. It could be any one of them, and they typically release the energy in unison then and let it go to whichever the target is. Lucky says some people who can see, there's those who can see energy, might see a cone above a person without a hat even, and that person was known to have otherworldly powers, and the hat was representative of that. So that's another theory. And now when it comes to a cone of power, generally it's something that is done as a group. However, it can be done by a single individual. It kind of depends on your own personal energy levels or abilities. And it can be just as powerful as a group. So it really depends upon the energy within the group, really, truly. If you have 12 low-level or low-energy individuals, you might not raise as much energy as one individual with a very high level of energy. All right, hold on just a minute. So, as far as the wizard's hat goes, honestly, it's about the same as the witch's hat. It was just often associated with magic. So, for me, a wizard and witch is kind of interchangeable. To me, they are just two different words for one who practices magic or one who utilizes magic. And it's just two different labels. The one I have problems with is the warlock, because the definition of warlock is oathbreaker. So I don't feel that warlock is appropriate for witchcraft unless you are breaking your oaths that you've made to your deity, to yourself, to your coven, to your family, that kind of thing. So, wizard's hat, pretty much the same as a witch's hat, in my mind, in my interpretation. It's thought, honestly, that Tolkien may have been the impetus to really apply the wizard's hat with Gandalf, for instance. Perhaps. But, where'd he get it? But, Tolkien then actually was a fantastic writer. It'd be just awesome to be able to sit and have a chat with him nowadays, because he could see things differently. That's why his fiction was so awesome. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to raising your cone of energy by yourself, you're going to still include the chanting or drumming, the singing. Drumming, you could do physical exercise to draw that energy. So Leo, actually that's a really good question. So time out, squirrel moment. Leo asks, does a male call himself a witch as well then? Yes. Witch is just a label, like doctor or officer or medic. I don't know if that helps. It's just a label. And so, yes, there can be male witches, there can be female witches, there can be male wizards, there can be female wizards. I know, like, for instance, in Harry Potter, the girls were witches and the boys were wizards, but honestly, it's just interchangeable. A lot of fiction actually will go through and differentiate witch from wizard just by power or the way they operate. Wizard often brings to mind someone who is a solo practitioner rather than a group. Witch is often associated with a group, just because that's where we've, at least here in the U.S., often just that's where the label seems to fit. Whether or not that seems accurate or is truly accurate, that's just our contemporary interpretation of the words. Just like mage could be male or female. It could be either. To me, wizard, witch, and mage are all very, very gender neutral. You could be any one of those. Part of it has to do with your tradition. Often, like, druidry is associated with wizards, and Wicca with witches. So within that context, it could go either way. Yeah, it's just a label. Kind of like purple is just a color. But our contemporary society does attribute some different traits to the different names, just because that's the way our society is. We like to label things. So you're welcome. Titan hasn't been around to ask questions, so I'm glad Leo is. Thank you. So when you are trying to raise a cone of power, there's many different ways. Often they're very rhythmic. So this actually includes sex, because sex is often very rhythmic in nature. And it is a way to create energy or use energy. And, not everybody does the same type of ritual. Many different traditions, many different types of rituals, and often there are different rituals for different purposes. The ritual you use at Samhain is not necessarily the same one that you're going to use at Beltane. So, and it may yet be different than something you use for a full moon or a new moon. All very different. Healing versus, weather working. Again, very, very different. And some energies are better for different things. So with the cone, yes, very iconic, very symbolic of witchcraft, yes, and often a very symbolic representation of the cone of power. Now, I guess there was at one point heretics were even forced to wear conical hats because it showed that they were about to be, off with their heads. And there's also some thought that maybe the conical hat has to do with the body's chakras, because it's very similar to the way chakras would be set up, with the root chakra being down at the bottom and going up. Oh, Leo, honey, you'll never stop learning. So Leo says, still learning so much and want to ensure I'm understanding the true terms, or at least the truest form. Oh, man, there's as many definitions of some of those terms as there are witches. That's part of the reason why I tell everybody, research. Do your own studies, buy the books, do the things, make notes, have a journal, because you may, and this, again, why I consider myself an intuitive witch, because there's some things that make sense to me from some traditions, and some that make sense from other traditions. And some I'm like, WTF, y'all. And so it's just a combination, and this is just my process, my melting pot, if you will, when it comes to magic and witchcraft. So, like with the, raising the cone of power, the cone of energy, it's very much, for me, is just raising energy. And for me, energy is the same as magic. Magic is energy. And so if you're raising that energy to perform a ritual, you're raising that magic to perform the ritual. It's very, very similar. So in that respect, scientist or, engineer could be synonymous with witch, from my opinion. But then that's just my interpretation. So, yeah, and there's a lot of stuff out there. It's just like, what? So I've been trying to do the TikTok thing, which has been kind of an adventure. It's fun though, right? Because you get 30 seconds to 3 minutes, depending on where you're picking for a video. And on the one hand, 30 seconds isn't very long at all. Otherwise, holy cow, 30 seconds is a long time. Depends what you're trying to say. But, in doing this, I'm trying to use it as a marketing platform, mostly. But I looked at a lot of the witch talk videos, and some of them are like, okay then. No. But, just like there are many different, versions of Christianity, there are very, very many different versions of, witchcraft and magic. And, I mean, there's a lot of different deities out there. So it makes sense that there are a lot of different interpretations or ways to work magic. And just because somebody else does it and it doesn't make any sense to you, doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's really different than what makes sense to you. It's part of the reason why I'm doing the show, is so that I can impart, and try to figure out some of that stuff and see if I can make it make sense to me. And some of it works. And some of it is like, okay. I'm just going to go sit over here and you do your thing. And, that's just the way of it. That's just the way of it. there's so much out there. Now, when you do research, the words you use online for your searching for information are important. Words have meaning, right? And so be careful what you're putting out there for research. I mean, and make sure you have it spelled correctly. And if you need to, there's a couple different sites out there that will help you pronounce things. Like last night, talking about the Indian Buddhas and such, the Tantric Buddhas. Yeah, that's not my first language in the slightest. I'd probably be a lot closer to German or Norse than I would be to Indian. But that's just the way of it. I looked it up and I sounded it out, and I still messed up most of them. So yeah. And yeah, I know it's not considered Indian, but I sure hope y'all know what I'm trying to say. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that before I just bury myself further. So for a little bit of fun, and as I was Googling, exactly, Leo. I'll go talk to the trees while you do that. Yeah. So Googling, I found this website. It's nerdsonearth.com. And they have 7 different types of wizard hats or witch hats. So I figured I've got a couple of minutes before the break. We'll talk about it, right? So the first one is the Gandalf or the Merlin hat. A wizard is never late, nor is he ever early, but with his stylish pointed hat, he'll arrive in style precisely when he's meant to. Actually, I love that quote. But yes, absolutely. Classic wizard hat. Kind of the wide brim, kind of up and tipped over. Absolutely. The Zatanna, or the topper. So this is the top hat, if you will. And it's also considered a bag of holding. So it's kind of like the Mary Poppins version of the hat. You can put almost anything in there. The Raistlin, or the hood, basically. So it's, if you will, the yeah. It's so once upon a time, everybody wore a cloak, right? Well, not all cloaks had hats. So if you had a cloak on, and it might be raining, you would put on a cloak above it, and it just fastened right at the neck, right? And it was a hood basically, and it came out, and so is the hood, like Robin Hood, Little Red Riding Hood. She had a red hood over her cape, and yeah, it's just another type of wizard's hat. The Dumbledore hat, and that's the tasseled version. So think Scrooge. Scrooge, when he's in bed sleeping for the ghost to come to haunt him, he's wearing his night hat. It's kind of this long floppy thing with the tassel on the end. That is the Dumbledore. And then there's the Morgan Le Fay. It's not really a hat, more of an accessory. It's a little circlet that just goes around. And then there's the Dresden. So if any of you have ever read the Dresden books, which I really like, it's kind of like a fedora, if you will. But yeah, it's just a hat. Let's see. And then there is the Willow. And the Willow hat is a lot more like mine. And not necessarily in style, but it's a hat. So yeah, it was just, nerds on earth. It made me giggle. And yes, the little icon. Yeah, nerds on earth. The icon looks like it's a dude. Looks like an alien head, really. He's got glasses. Little, the beard and mustache kind of thing. And he's got antennas. So yeah, nerds on earth. But yeah, the wizard's hat. So basically, a hat can be whatever you make it out to be. It could be your basic your basic hat. It could be a ball cap, your trucker's hat. It could be a stocking cap. You know, whatever you choose to wear upon your head as your witch's hat. My biggest suggestion is make sure it's comfortable. And it does what you need it to do, whether it's to protect your head, cover your hair, or, you know, I kind of like the hood, honestly, because if I'm out and about in the woods, you know, ticks, spiders, beetles, those are all real things. I don't necessarily want them to, you know, fall down my collar, so, you know, wearing a hood makes total sense to me. They just do. And then there's nothing quite as classy as a top hat. So, anyways, top of the hour, when we come back, we'll do some singing bowl, and we'll talk a little bit about herbology. So I'll be right back, guys. Hello, my lovelies. This is Paisley Wild, and we're off adventuring into these spaces between, where the chat room is going crazy with their nerdgasms. Actually, I've heard that one before. Oh, my stars. Generally, my visualization has a lot to do with Trekkies in this particular instance. For some reason, I don't know why, but, cosplayers, I guess, in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. Because me and my brain went there. No coffee. We're going to stick with the lemon water. It might burn differently, I suppose. Okay, it's time for singing bowl to cleanse my brain here. You guys, boy. And just like that, my tranquility is disappeared by the cat. Just doing silly stuff. She's mad at the dog, I think. Music cuts out a bit before I come back, each time leaving you with a hot mic. Well, it's a good thing I don't do anything too wild and crazy with a hot mic. I'm not a politician. Just saying. Thanks, Justin. I will work on that. All right, so first hour we talked about the hat, magic of the hat, and so second hour I got to thinking, maybe we should talk about things like herbs, harvesting and preserving, that kind of thing. Wrong button. Because here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's that time of the year when, we are thinking fall. And, for a lot of us, it means it's time to harvest a lot of those different herbs, especially the wild-crafted ones. But, some of, the timing when it comes to harvesting herbs has a lot to do with what it is. And, no, Wanda, that was my first bowl. The one I talked about last night, just because it's my favorite. So I should play one of the other ones once in a while too. They probably feel left out over on the other desk. But yeah, so when it comes to what plants you're harvesting, that has a lot to do with the timing and the way you harvest them. For instance, an example given here is when harvesting mint, you just want the leaves. You don't necessarily want the stems. You don't really want the seeds, that kind of thing. Now, generally speaking, for most herbs, you want to harvest them before they develop flowers, because after they flower, they tend to lose some of their flavor and can become quite bitter. And if you're going to pick the leaves, you do want them to be pretty tender. So when they're younger and when they're tender, they tend to have the most flavor or highest amount of oil, which helps with taste and also fragrance. Excuse me. And then a lot of times, the best time to pick your herbs or your plants is first thing in the morning, early in the morning, just as the dew is evaporating, but before the heat of the day, because you don't want them to be soggy when you pick them, but you also don't want them to be hot. And then this is why you don't want to necessarily pick herbs and such along a roadside, because you don't know what's been sprayed, or there's dirt and grime and stuff, because you don't necessarily want to wash some of that stuff, because you're going to lose some of the aromatic oils that are within the leaves. Justin says, with cannabis we use the whole plant. Yes, you can make a lovely tea with the stems, and heard it's fantastic for the flu. The common flu, your average flu bug that most of us got before 2 years ago. Well, a lot of the different flowering herbs, such as lavender or borage, B-O-R-A-G-E, borage, or chamomile, you want to harvest those flowers before they're fully open. Now you can harvest any of those plants for their seeds, especially if you want to grow them, but things like dill, fennel, coriander, caraway, you want to harvest the seeds just as the seed pods are changing colors. And then root crops such as ginseng or golden seal should be dug at the end of summer or early fall. Now, I wish we could find some ginseng locally. It's not really something that grows wild here. I've seen it wild in the Midwest along some of the rivers, but it's a little different. Now, when it comes to drying herbs, you can use your oven and turn it way down low. You can use a dehydrator, and just pay attention. You can use your air fryer. A lot of them have a setting that you can turn down low. Convection oven, again, turn down the temperature. Or if you don't want to use electricity, you can use the sun. There is a lot of different ways you can make an air dryer. My favorite, honestly, is a little bit of a DIY. You use picture frames. You can get them at the dollar store. Or you can go to Goodwill or your thrift stores. They often have frames. Or as you are yard sailing, you can pick up picture frames all over the place. And you just get some mesh, like for replace your screens or to fix your screens. And you'll want to just stretch it across your frame and staple it in there. And then if you put eyelets in your frame, you can tie a string to it. And you can just create this whole tower, basically, that you can hang from your ceiling for drying your herbs. One of the benefits of this is you can use muslin or cheesecloth to go around it, or more screen if you have enough. And the reason for that is so that bugs don't land on it, basically. You want the air to flow through there, but not necessarily the bugs to do their thing. So if you are out harvesting different things, and depending on when you're doing it, if you harvest early and frequently, it'll encourage the plants to grow more, have new growth. So you can prune a perennial, for instance, about half its height. Annuals, you can cut back even further. A lot of culinary herbs, such as chives or basil, mint, parsley, oregano, that kind of thing, grow back quickly and benefit from constant pruning. And you can keep harvesting those annual herbs right up until frost. Now, after August, I wouldn't necessarily cut your perennial herbs. After August, you just want to let them grow until you're, just really, truly picking them, because it may cause them to go ahead and start growing again, and they won't harden off before winter. So, Now, depending on your growing season and where you're at, because I get it, I live in North Idaho. Not all growing seasons are equal. I talked to my dad who lives in North Carolina, and often he's planting potatoes in January. And in January, I often look out the window to 3 or 4 feet of snow. So I get it. Not all growing seasons are the same. But if you gather lavender or tarragon, for instance, in early July, you can cut the plants back and about half their original height, and then they may produce a second bloom towards the fall. And a lot of times, the herbs taste the best, of course, when they're fresh. But sometimes, you need to collect and harvest. And I get it, especially like when we're seeing so much uncertainty in the world right now. And if you go to the grocery store, it's frustrating because there's blank spots in the grocery stores now, which is something I don't know that we've ever really seen in recent times here in the U.S. We're not used to that. That's a different show. I'm gonna stop there. So, it may be time to look at what you can harvest or what you can pick. So, some of the plants I'm going to talk about, especially the herbs, are things you might be able to pick up at your farmers markets, or they may be things you can pick up in your grocery store, depending on where you're at, or roadside markets. I know they're all over the place, and it may be worthwhile for you to buy the fresh and go ahead and preserve them so that you have them down the road. Because honestly, there's a reason why the spice trade, and I'm not talking Dune, and the stuff that turns your eyes blue, but spices, were so expensive before the steam engine, really, because they were very, very expensive to transport. And, if you want to make sure you've got something tradable, herbs are a really good one. They really, truly are. And I have, Julia gave me some lemon balm. Love it. Num, 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 num. So, it makes a fantastic tea. I have elderberry trees here. I'll be making elderberry syrup again. In years past, I've made elderberry syrup. I've made elderberry wine. I've got a digestive aid also that I've made. But I've also frozen elderberries so I can make them or use them later in the year. Kind of depends. But there's a lot of different things you can use with elderberries, for instance. But there's other plants coming up. Now's a good time to harvest walnut leaves, honestly. Walnut leaves in a tincture. It's very, very good for the skin. You dry the leaf, you grind it up, or powder it just a bit, steep it with some water, and you can spritz it on your skin. It's very good for skin irritations. I know people who swear by it for eczema or even psoriasis. So, there's different things out there that you can use for preserving, or you can start preserving. Yep, it's the train. Choo-choo. As you're looking at preserving, you may want to invest in some good old-fashioned vodka. Vodka does a lot when it comes to preserving things. So, even though a lot of herbs are best fresh, there are some different ways to do storage, whether short-term or long-term. So some long-stemmed herbs like basil, cilantro, and parsley can be stored in a glass of water, similar to cut flowers. We just trim the ends and put them in a glass with about an inch or so of water. You can put them on the counter, you can put them in the fridge, and they'll stay fresh and easy to use for about a week, roughly. Other fresh herbs, such as rosemary, chives, thyme, can be stored a week or longer in your vegetable drawer in your fridge. You want to wrap them in a damp paper towel and then place them in an open or perforated plastic bag. And then you don't want to rinse them until just before use because they do have some protective film to them often when you pick them. And then the longer they're stored like that, of course, the less flavor that they'll have. And when it comes to drying herbs, a couple different ways to do it. Like I mentioned, you can use the screen. Citronella. Fresh citronella is fantastic. Justin has lemon thyme and the citronella that they grow locally. I would love a pot of citronella that I could keep next to my front door for mosquitoes. And Leo says that too many blank spots and no one talking about it at the grocery stores. Yeah. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. That's not really a pagan or witchy thing, but yet it is. We'll see. Oil. Yes, you want a good oil. Whether it's a fractionated coconut oil or a high quality olive oil, it varies too. So when it comes to retaining the flavor, dried herbs can be kept for a couple of years. Generally, you want to use them within the first year, but because they do lose potency over time, you don't necessarily want to dry them in the sun because they will lose flavor. They will change in color. Same with using the oven, though, or dehydrator, just because there is heat involved. When that happens, and the heat will change the flavor and will change the color of the herbs. That's why the screen or being able to air dry in some way, shape, or form is truly best. So low moisture herbs like rosemary, thyme, dill, savory, sage, parsley. You can cut the whole branch, give it a gentle rinse in cool water. Exactly, Leo. And then you can tie the cuttings in bunches and hang them upside down in a well-ventilated, dark, dust-free room. And they generally take about 2 to 3 weeks to dry. And then you just remove the leaves from the stems and store them in an airtight container. And then you crush or grind just before use. A lot of the seasonings that we buy at the grocery store have been processed for a while, and so they're not as fresh as they could be. Even the fresh herbs that you might buy in the vegetable section, those have been sitting there for a little bit. They were in the... It takes time to go from where they were grown, they get picked, they get processed, they get stuck in the truck, taken to a warehouse, where they're pulled apart, separated into smaller bundles for the individual stores, shipped to the store, and where they're unpacked and either kept in their cooler or put out for display and being bought. So there's time there. Same with the dried herbs. There is some flavor loss because what you see in the grocery store is not very fresh. Part of the reason why farm fresh foods in general just taste better. Truly. Very, very truly. So, so herbs with large tender leaves or a high moisture content, like bay leaf, basil, lemon balm, lavage, mint, lemon verbena, tarragon, for example, do need to be dried quickly so they do not mold. You can put those on a netting or a window screen. You just want to strip the leaves from the stems and then lay them in a single layer on the rack. Then, a couple days go by. You want to flip them over, and then, after about a week and a half, you want to take them off the screen and, put them in a tightly closed container for later use. Now, real quick side note here. As you're drying things, often the leaves look different when they're dried from when they are fresh. So you're going to want to label what you have out there so you know what's going on, so nobody messes with it. Because mint tastes a lot different in a dish than, say, basil. The flavor profile is a little different. And you may be trying to season your lamb with mint, and if you grab basil by accident because it was not labeled correctly, you're going to notice it when it comes time to eat because it just won't have the same flavor profile. That's all there is to it. So, yeah, labeling is important. Very, very important. Now, you can freeze herbs for a longer term storage. You want to rinse them, pat them dry, and then spread them on a single layer in a pan, and then put the pan in the freezer. And then after they're frozen, you can just put them in an airtight plastic container or bag and keep them in the freezer until you're ready to use. Seal meals are fantabulous. Absolutely, Justin. Now, I have seen where some people will take herbs especially like chives or sage or et cetera, et cetera. And they'll put it in like an ice cube tray and put olive oil in there too. And they'll freeze it like that with an ice cube tray so that the herbs are, in the oil already. You just throw that into your pan as you're getting ready to sear your meat or whatever. And that's kind of an idea. I personally love the smell of drying herbs in a house. I mean, I don't know what it is. A lot of times those smells don't all go well together, but they're still pretty fantastic. I don't know why. Basil, borage, chives, dill, lemongrass, mint, oregano, sage, savory, tarragon, and thyme all freeze really actually pretty well. And they will maintain their quality for about 6 months. You will want to chop the chives and lemongrass, of course, before you freeze them because they're very, very thin and they freeze quickly. Now, you can also freeze dry if you have access to a freeze dryer. I would love a freeze dryer. Not in my budget. It's on my wish list. But definitely not in my budget. So, okay, just checking the time. So, that being said, all right. I've got some herbs that you can forage for, even if you don't have a garden as we're looking at fall. These are kind of medicinal too. And when I say medicinal herbs, they've been known to be medicinal. I'm not saying that you should use them. I'm just saying that these are some potential plants you might be interested in. You'll want to do some research and make sure you actually are picking the right plant. And you'll want a couple different references, not just, Pinterest. There's a lot of really great information on Pinterest, and there's a lot of really bad information on Pinterest, so just be aware. You want to make sure you have the right stuff. Just like if you go mushroom hunting and you're new at it, don't go by yourself. Go with a group that knows what they're doing. That way you don't accidentally eat the wrong kind of mushroom once. And yeah. So, when it comes to herbs, you all also want to make sure you're obeying laws, because there are some things that are protected that you shouldn't harvest, of course. And, if something is on somebody's private property, just be polite and ask first. And if they say no, then just let it be. So, yeah. We've all heard of someone who touched something they shouldn't have and then touched a part of them they shouldn't have because, wow, yeah, it makes it bad. For instance, poison ivy, poison oak, nettle, stinging nettle. Stinging nettle is really good for you in a tea, but the sap, when you first pick it, will make your hands sting and burn. And if you wash your hands in hot water and you spread that oil then around on your skin and say you use the bathroom, you will know. Kind of like jalapenos. So just be aware. Now, as we are approaching fall, there are some things that are harder to dig up or to harvest. And so now is the time to really be paying attention because it is harder to get some of that stuff. So first on my list here, Justin says, yeah, wash your hands well after chopping ghost peppers, especially on a hot day when you have to go pee. Yep. You only did that once, I bet. So yes, positive ID is very, very important when it comes to what you're picking because you want to make sure you're getting the right thing and not, something that's going to make you uncomfortable. Yeah. 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 And so the first on my list here, things that grow wild that you are probably going to be interested in is burdock. So burdock has the little burrs and was the the brainchild, or the originator of the brainchild for Velcro, because yeah, Velcro's good. And I'm going to stop there. I don't even know why I started, because hey, it's break time already. So we're going to start with Burdock when we come back from break, because yeah, we just need to. So there. We'll be right back, guys. Hello, my lovelies. This is Paisley Wild, and we are off adventuring into the spaces between. Because yes, we can. And we are. Actually, it's a good time. And hold on. There we go. So, tonight we talked about the cone, or the cone of power, the witch's hat, and now we are talking about herbs. We talked a little bit about preserving and plant and picking, that kind of thing. So now, what are some things that you can pick in the fall that are good to have? Yes. First on my list, burdock. I started there. So burdock is a liver healer, detoxifier, and nutritive herb that is rich in inulin and supports your microbiome. So inulin is used for, well, it's a type of prebiotic. So it's not digested or absorbed within the stomach. It stays within the bowel and helps certain beneficial bacteria grow. So it's kind of a starchy substance found in fruits, vegetables, herbs, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's really good. It's in artichokes. The roots are very medicinal. And generally you want to pick or dig those up from the first year of the plant. And you can use them in dinners, or at dinner time, in teas, and as a tincture. And honestly, this is one that you probably do want to dig up because, well, you don't want the burrs, trust me. Just saying. And I've also heard a poultice with the leaves is really good for burns. So I don't know, but I've heard. That would be one I would have to research a bit more. Next on my list is dandelion. Now, dandelion is one of those superfoods in my mind. And it's been getting a lot of press, and I think it's appropriate for it to be just such a big deal. Very medicinal, very healing, supports the liver. They are a little bitter, the leaves are, and same with the roots, because they do aid in digestion. So the roots themselves can be a bit diuretic. You can eat the leaves. You can use the flowers to make wine or jellies, or, yeah, you can put them in your salads. You can eat them. Now, there have been some preliminary studies that show an interesting correlation between a dandelion root tea and they use resolution in the article, but I would say regression of cancer. So dandelion is one of those things that, how often do we hear about dandelion being a weed and something to get rid of, and et cetera, et cetera? Well, no, it's not a weed. One of the first flowers, bees love dandelions. So yes, dandelion roots, you can roast them. They do make an interesting coffee substitute. They taste a little bit like coffee to me personally. It is caffeine free, but it's got other stuff going on. And, there's a lot to be said about dandelion, and it's something that most of us have growing in our yards. So if you don't, spray bug stuff all over your yard or other chemicals, it's one of those things you could just harvest and eat directly out of your yard. The leaves really are good in your salads, honestly. So you can also pick chicory. Dandelions are everywhere. I don't care who brought them, settlers or birds. I love dandelions. Chicory is next on the list. So the roots are similar to dandelion, as they do support the liver and have a lot of the similar properties, but they are bitter. Chicory roots have been used as a coffee substitute for a very long time. You can locate the plants in springs or summer when they're blooming, and then you want to mark them for fall harvesting because the flower is very distinctive. Personally, I think over roasting chicory ruins coffee when it's mixed into coffee, but that's just my own personal opinion. Some people really like the flavor of chicory. Another one that is good to harvest, and one I wish I had more of, is mallow. So like marshmallow, common mallow, mallow roots, something you can harvest now. The roots are very, very rich in mucilage and can be used to calm upset tummies, coughs, and colds. Marshmallow, to me, is a natural sweetener, just like licorice root is. But it is very, very soothing on the throat, and yeah, just one of those really, really good ones to have. If you have a local source, that's awesome. If you don't, that's one I would definitely invest in. So cherry bark. So the inner bark of the black cherry or choke cherry tree can be used as a cough remedy. It also supports the immune system and can stop unproductive coughing so a person can sleep. So if it's that dry hacking cough that just isn't doing much for you, the tea just before bed will help soothe that need to cough because there's nothing happening. So it's that unproductive cough, like the whooping cough, if you will. Ginger and turmeric. Yes, I have ginger growing in my living room. Love ginger. Ginger's so good. Organic pickled ginger, one of my favoriteest things ever. Nom, 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 nom. Nom. But and turmeric is its own class, another one of those superfoods, guys and gals. So fall is when we generally harvest ginger root and turmeric. And if you're somewhere where it grows easily, man, are you a lucky dog. That's just all there is to it. After the tops die off, you can dig up the roots. You wash them, allow them to harden off a bit before storing. If it's not natural in your area, you can plant it. So it depends on where you're at. Some people can grow ginger and turmeric, but definitely something that I would highly recommend having in your medicinal herb cabinet. Make sure, checking that. There we go. Yep, I can grow it indoors. It looks like a bamboo, actually, and the kittens tried to eat the leaves, but I have a feeling the leaves are a little peppery, so they stopped. And I've been using that same plant now to block other plants. But yeah, ginger and honey tea, nom nom nom, so good for you. So good for you. As we're moving towards fall, rose hips are starting to develop. Now, I have roses that generally don't have very big hips. They really don't. They're like half the size of a marble. I have seen some wild roses that have rose hips the size of a ping pong ball. Oh my goodness. Yeah, rose hips are just really good for you. They are cherry red. They're very rich in anthocyanins, quercetin, and other flavonoids, and vitamin C, as well as beta-carotene. You can dry them and use them in winter teas, soups, that kind of thing. You will want to make sure you pull out the seeds before you dry them, just because the seeds come with little bitty fuzzies, kind of like the inside of an artichoke, that can get clogged in your throat. So you want to make sure you don't leave those in there, so you want to clean them. Rose hips are fantastic. Used to be that people would drink rose hip tea because it was really good with the vitamin C to help against, not shingles, but scurvy, basically. Yeah, you need the vitamin C. Once upon a time, because oranges weren't as plentiful then as they are now. Sunflowers. Sunflowers. So if you still have sunflowers blooming in your garden, you can pick the petals, by the way, and dry them for winter tea. You can also dry the leaves and infuse them in oil for skin-soothing lip balms and salves. And then the sunflower buds, you can actually, give them a quick fry up, and they make a good munchie. Not just, the seeds themselves, which those are pretty fantabulous, but yeah. There's a lot of different things. Let's see, another one that you can harvest in the fall is fennel. similar to dill or caraway, and it's got the little burst of seeds at the top and the umbrella-like head. They can dry on the stalk, or you can pick them yourself and dry them, inside, because once they turn from that green color to the light brown, they'll fall to the ground really easily. And fennel, so benefits of licorice root. So licorice root has something in it called, hold on. And same with anise and fennel. So anise is antibacterial, antifungal, and anti-inflammatories. Anise is, but the fennel, the licorice root, and the anise all have that same kind of flavor to it. And there is some studies being done on how beneficial it is for combating the current virus that's floating around. So yeah, just a thought. So yeah, fennel's one of those that I would definitely keep. So you can harvest the fennel seeds by snapping off the flower heads and placing them head down inside of a brown paper bag. And then you can shake the bag vigorously to release the seeds. And just really easy, It doesn't have to be anything major. Let's see. Just looking here. Something else that I have locally, goldenrod. So goldenrod has bright yellow flower spikes and is pretty prevalent around the U.S. It is a flower that generally flourishes later in the year. And it's often easy to overlook because the flowers are small, and it may be easiest just to harvest the entire flower stalk, and then you want to hang them upside down in a brown paper bag with some holes cut into it for ventilation. And you'll want to shake the bags every so often to remove the blooms that fall off of the spike. And the flowers then are a really good tea to have during the winter, because it's a good antimicrobial. So if you're worried about getting sick, that kind of thing. And it is also an anti-catarrhal, Catarrhal, catarrhal. And it's something that helps remove excess mucus. So if you're feeling a little snotty, this might be something to take. You can also infuse the flowers with an oil to make a muscle rub, kind of like icy hot. Let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, hold on, gotta check the time. Okay. There are some things you can plant in the fall. Plan for the future. Parsley is something you can plant in the fall. And it's something actually you can plant pretty much any time. If you have the ability to have an indoor garden, like an herb garden, definitely something. Parsley, I use a lot of parsley. I really do. I did gnocchi with a creamy Alfredo Alfredo sauce with tomatoes and lots of parsley in it with chicken for dinner tonight. This turned out really fantastic. It was gluten-free gnocchi, and I was really surprised by how light and fluffy the gnocchi was. Seriously. Because gnocchi often is that kind of heavy and dense because it's a potato thing, but no, it was really good. I was surprised. Parsley can be planted in spring, late summer, or early autumn, depending on where you're at, and if you have greenhouses or polytunnels or anything like that. So it just kind of depending on what you've got going on, how you can, what your growing season is like. It's something that really, once you've got the last harvest before freeze, you can just pull them up, throw them in the compost pile, and it's no big deal. And I really like parsley, and I use it a lot. I've talked about in the past how some people will keep an empty jar that says love, and they shake that into their food all the time to spread the love or add love to the food. Parsley is kind of one of those plants for me. Let's see. Chervil is one that looks a little bit like parsley, but it's a little more delicate. Often it's just more ornamental and pretty, but it's something you can have. Cilantro. Some people like it, some people don't. I get it. I'm not as big with cilantro. I'll use it, but not as much. Sumac berries. But like Don loves cilantro, and it's really important in quite a few dishes. I'll do a fresca salsa, and it has to have cilantro. It just doesn't taste right without it. So if you have, it does like a cooler temperature. So if you have a hot summer, maybe you'll want to plant it again in the fall, or early fall, so you have it later. Because it bolts, which means it goes to flower and then to seed right away. But that's not all bad, because you can harvest the seeds, because that is coriander. And those are both really good. Coriander is fantastic with pork. Sage is something that you can grow pretty much wherever. It's a woody shrub. It grows 2 to 3 feet tall, and it can be susceptible to winter damage if it's really cold or really snowy. But if you cover it up in the winter or the fall leading towards winter, it'll come right back in the spring. So I do the same thing with my mint. Spinach. So Justin says, we just planted our folk crops 2 weeks ago: spinach, peas, Brussels sprouts, and more broccoli and cauliflower. Yeah, now's a really good time to be planting the cabbage family, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, because it's fall crops, not folk crops. This makes more sense. Because they like the cooler temperatures. Thyme is really good for your chicken, your poultry type dishes, and it grows very easily in a little pot in the windowsill. The flowers are very bee friendly, so in the spring, as things warm up, if you've got them in pots in the windowsill, it's really easy to take them outside and start hardening them off so they're outside during the summer, and the bees will love you for it. Marjoram, it's a savory plant. Sometimes it winters well in cold frames, sometimes it doesn't. It kind of depends on what you've got going on. If it goes to seed, you have your seeds, but you can mulch it in with some straw and burlap, and it'll give the roots time to set and be happy as you move into the colder months. Chives are easy, really, truly. Chives are just easy. And they smell good. I've used them as a ground cover because they smell good to walk on. But the little flowers very, very, very much attract the bees. Lavender. Lavender's good. Love lavender. We have a lavender farm locally that I want to go get some lavender from, because for some reason, my soil here is just a little too sandy. Just a little too sandy, yeah. And but if you have lavender that comes back year after year, you're more power to you. You can also mulch that with straw. Straw makes a very good mulch, actually. Side note, something you may not know. If you put fresh straw in a water source, like a pond, for instance, as the straw breaks down, it releases an enzyme into the water that makes it harder for green algae to bloom. So, just weird, random farming hack. Farming hack, gotta have them. Sage is one of those easiest things. Sage. Same with garlic. Homegrown garlic. Nummy, nummy, nummy. That's another easy one. Oregano. Also easy, generally. It generally self-sows, so if you are going to have oregano, kind of like mint, you'll probably want it in a box or some way to, keep it from running away from you, because it will spread happily. And another one of those that you can mulch in to keep it happy. Let's see. You can also, not just, I mentioned rose hips earlier, but you can also pick the buds and the petals, because you can use them for many things. You can use them in spell jars, you can use them in rituals, you can use them, sprinkle them in your bath when they're dried. Rose is pretty doggone flexible. Many varieties are edible even and taste pretty good. You just want to make sure that you don't have something that's been sprayed with chemicals, so be careful with the ones you might get from the store. I wouldn't eat those necessarily unless they say that they are, specifically for food, but you want to pay attention. So rose oil is actually very expensive, so if you have rose that you can, do yourself, often if you have a rose tea, it helps with inflammatory conditions, especially in the respiratory tract. So you can do a poultice or you can do a tea. And yeah, it just kind of smells good. Raspberry leaf. Now's a good time to be picking raspberry leaf. As you're picking raspberries, 1 bucket for the raspberries, 1 bucket for the leaves. Because those leaves are very, very, very good for you. It's an astringent, and it helps tighten and tone relaxed tissues, specifically those in the digestive and reproductive organs. And so, in theory, it's thought that a raspberry tea is good for like your pelvic muscles, is good for labor pains, that kind of thing. But you can also use it as, if you've got loose skin, like, as we age, our chins tend to wag just a little bit, or get the angel wings, that sort of thing. Using it as a tonic or putting it in your lotions. Those are really good. Mullein. Mullein is very, very good for you. And I've been eyeballing quite a few. They're little bright yellow flowers. It's a week or so after they show up. That's when you should be harvesting them. They can be very, very tall. The leaves can be 12 inches long. They're often very soft. You can use them as TP if you're out and about and you don't have any. Just saying. So if you want to harvest, you can pull the mullein stalk down to about your level. You don't necessarily want to break it, but you want to pull the individual flowers and buds from the flower spike, and it'll be sticky because there's a really big rosin content. And mullein flowers are good for inflammation, and can also be, especially in a tincture, used for relaxing. So if you're stressing or anxiety, that kind of thing, you can also infuse them into an oil. And then once they're dried, they used to be called witches' torches, because the saps in there are really, they burn as a really good torch. Peach leaves are another thing that you can harvest. They are good for skin eruptions, digestive and respiratory issues, and menopause, actually. So really good for nausea. It's amazing to me the number of plants that we pick the fruits because the fruits are yummy. Peaches, for instance, love a good peach. But the leaves are good. Same with raspberries. Yarrow, I think, is the last one I'm going to have time for. Yarrow has a little bitty white flower. It kind of reminds me of dill, but it isn't. And as soon as the flowers bloom, you want to harvest it kind of mid-morning after the dew is dried. But you can have the whole plant. You want to grab the base of the stem and pull the whole thing out so you have the roots or just the tips, whichever. but it's good for circulation and a way to lower body temperature. And it's good for cramps and digestive issues. And it's a good antiseptic wash for wounds. And you can dry the flowers and actually put them in the wounds directly. So yeah, those really good ones. I've got more. I'm not going to talk about them because, hey, our night is done and over with. So yeah, herbology. There's so much information out there that is good for us in general. It's not just witchy. So check your gardens and harvest safely, and I'll see you next weekend. This is Paisley Wild. Merry meet and merry part and merry meet again, and we'll see you next time. Good night, all.